The following is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion advised.
Nowhere in the corridors of pale green and gray, nowhere in the suburbs in the cold light of day, there in the midst of it, so alive and alone, words support like bone. Dreaming of Mercy Street, where you're inside out. Dreaming of mercy.
Hey, how are you? This is Michael Dane. Welcome to that podcast show. And this is a very important show that we are going to present to you tonight. The show deals with domestic violence, a very sensitive subject. We are out of the studio and on location, and we are here with my very special guest, the first guest ever to appear on that podcast show. Talking about Lori. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. So today we're going to talk about your situation with a guy named Joe, who at one point was your husband.
Yes.
You experienced a lot of domestic violence and verbal abuse, and I guess why don't you start out by telling us how you met him, what attracted you to him, and how the relationship became.
I was 19 years old and I was looking for someone to date. I had dated a couple people and really didn't go anywhere. So I was, kind of in a situation where my family and relatives and friends were all kind of dating people, getting married, having children, that type of thing. And I kind of wanted to do that myself. And so I didn't really know many guys, and I was quite shy, actually, and didn't have a lot of experience with dating. So I had asked my half-brother if he had known any single men that were looking to date anyone, and he said that he had a very good friend of his that he knew was single and looking to date. And, like all of us, he had some issues. And but aside from that, he was, told to me to be a pretty decent guy. So he said, I will go ahead and set you two up on a date and see if he's interested, and we'll go from there. So that's what he did. And we had our first date. And oddly enough, I already knew him and had seen him previously because he was my half-brother's friend. He would come over to the house. But there was a 12-year difference between us. He was 12 years older than me. So, he wasn't interested in me at that time, and I wasn't interested in him. But since we were both kind of older now, we seemed to be interested, and he wanted to date, and I wanted to date, so we started hanging out together, and wasn't too long before we were in the relationship that I kind of realized he had a lot of issues, I guess I should say. To me, it was a lot of issues because I had pretty much led a sheltered life and didn't really have a lot of experience in dealing with a lot of things involving relationships. But he would promise to come and show up for dates at certain times, and he wouldn't show up at that time. He might come over like 1, 2 in the morning. He'd be totally intoxicated, banging on my bedroom window. And I live with my parents, of course, so, wake everybody up in the home. And I would have to, go out there and calm him down and try to get him to leave peacefully without, causing any problems. And it'd be the same old thing, every time he would do this. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Forgive me. All this over and over. And, I did. I figured people make mistakes. They deserve, second chances. And so that's kind of how the relationship started out. And after we were together for probably 6 months, we had decided that we were going to, get engaged. So he proposed to me and I accepted. And it wasn't too long after that he went out and did one of his, drinking benders again, and kind of came back intoxicated, made a big old scene, and it was just up and down all the time, constantly. And my parents obviously didn't want me to be with this person because they could see warning signs and they could see that he was a lot more to deal with than I really needed to get involved in. But because I had never been in love with anybody and this was like my first long relationship, I didn't see it. Or if I did see it, I chose to ignore it. But I really didn't want to listen to what other people were telling me because I thought they were wrong. And for some reason, even though they were my family, I thought they were trying to just break us up for no valid reason. So I kept pursuing the relationship. And at one point, I guess I had kind of given up being treated like that, so I had called off the engagement. And, he was a master at what he did, and he was a good manipulator. And so, he convinced me that, no, I'll change, things will be different, everything will be fine, I'll go to AA, I'll get some help and those types of things. And so I thought, okay, the guy is willing to change. He's willing to put the time in. We'll go ahead with the wedding. And in between the time that the wedding was planned and we were making all the arrangements, I ended up getting pregnant. So he did not want the wedding to be when it was originally scheduled. He wanted to be married and, legally be the father when the baby came out. So we moved the wedding up and got married sooner, and things were going pretty decent at this point in time. He had started going to AA and was not drinking, and was it was going pretty well, and we were focusing on having a child, getting a house, getting married, all those types of things. And then after we got married, things were going good for a couple years after our daughter was born, and after that things started changing again, and he was starting to not go to AA, and he was starting to drink some, and I knew that he was using drugs. The only thing that I knew about was in marijuana, but anyway, so he was using drugs and alcohol, and he would go through these mood swings where one minute he'd be okay, the next minute he would be flying off the handle and upset about something. And just his whole demeanor would change when he got in these moods. And you couldn't talk to him. He was very standoffish and always arguing, looking for a fight, looking for something, to complain about and get off my back and stop this and stop that. So it's like I really couldn't do anything that was right. Yet I was.
Well, all my questions. Did at that time, did you feel that your safety was in jeopardy, or did that not come until later on in the relationship?
Well, at that particular time, I didn't feel that my safety was in jeopardy because he wasn't being physical at that time. The verbal abuse had started. It wasn't at its, height at that point, but it had started, and I had seen a change in him. The physical abuse didn't come till just a little bit later than that. But I noticed, he would be staying out later and coming in later and being intoxicated, being, verbally abusive, calling me names. And he did not want me to be involved in his business or, ask him why was he out so late and why didn't he let me know, and, all that type of stuff. He didn't want any confrontation. He just wanted to come and go and do exactly what he wanted to do and be fine. And anything that I said or did really irritated him and set him off. So I always felt like I was walking on eggshells around him. And I was trying to make the best of it. And at the time, I was working full time, trying to raise, the daughter, keep the household in order, do the wife things, if you will. And then trying to, make my marriage work, basically. Because people had told me from the beginning that it was going to be a failure and it wasn't going to last. And I wasn't raised to give up on things. I was raised in a Catholic household where, you get married and that's just what you do. You don't get divorced. They frown on that in the Catholic religion. So I was sticking in for everything I could and trying to make it work because I didn't want everybody to think that I was a failure and that I didn't listen to what they said, and everyone else was having their marriage work out and be successful, and I wanted the same thing. So it just became to the point where more and more things would happen with him, and I had to start covering up for the things that he was doing so other people wouldn't see what was actually going on in our relationship. And that I didn't want my parents to see how bad things had really gotten or were starting to get. So I kept making excuses for him and, why he couldn't come over and why he couldn't do things and, why this and why that. And that became a full-time job in and of itself, just trying to think of excuses for why he couldn't do things. Still trying to make believe that I had everything together in a perfect marriage and I could work through this and things would be just great. And then, our daughter, was about 4 years old, his behavior really started to change a lot. And I had thought, because he was so distant and never home, I had thought that he was, having an affair on me. So I was completely focused on this. And I would do the most irrational, ridiculous things. Example being, he did not have a license, but he had a vehicle. And so he would drive without, any license or anything. And one day he left and I wanted to see where he was going. So I wanted to follow him. And knowing that I may not like what I found, but I was on a pursuit. And so I got in my vehicle and I followed him, and he was quite a fast driver. So I remember going down 94 and he was going at least 85 miles an hour. And I was trying to keep up with him because I wasn't going to give up. I was on this pursuit to see where he was going and what he was doing. And so then when he got to this individual's house, I thought, well, now what am I supposed to do? How am I going to find out who lives here? How am I going to find out what he's doing here? And then I saw a woman come out of the house and they exchanged, a kiss and a hug. And I thought, okay, basically what I've been thinking is the case. You know, he's cheating on me. And that's all I thought. I never suspected anything else. So I tried to confront him, and of course, you know, that wasn't the case. Nothing I ever said was true. He was always correct and I was always wrong. And I said, okay, well, something's going on here, and I tried to get to the bottom of it. And the more I would antagonize him, the madder he would get. And so there were times where, you know, I like one time I recall I had a necklace on, and he just didn't like what I had to say. And so he proceeded to come over to me, take the necklace, and he just kept twisting it on my neck until, you know, it was getting very, very tight to where I couldn't breathe properly. And I'm like, you know, trying to get him off of me. And he was a thinner guy, but he was very strong. And he was tough. And as much as I tried, you know, I was having a difficult time struggling to get him off me. And so finally I kept fighting back, and I was able to push him off. And then he kind of let up on it. But, you know, things like that, they scar you for life. Because even today I can't wear anything around my neck. I don't like necklaces. I don't like scarves. I don't like turtlenecks. Anything that goes up around my neck, I don't like it. Because it instantly brings me back to that moment when that was happening.
Did you at that point think, I got to get out of this fucking relationship, I got to leave, go as far as I can go? Or did you think it was just an isolated incident that would blow off and things would get better?
I didn't think at that point in time to get out of the relationship. I guess what my reaction was at that point in time, or what I was thinking was, you know, maybe I should just kind of lay off of him. Maybe I shouldn't, you know, drill him so hard for information and get him to the point where he's so upset. So I was actually believing that I was doing the wrong thing. And who am I to question what he's doing? You know, he's a grown man. It's not my place. I'm not his mother. So I convinced myself that I was the one that was causing these outbursts in him. And if I would just, you know, rein myself back, then he wouldn't get upset, and then everything would be okay. And, you know, continuing to think that, I think of it now, and it was the most ridiculous thing ever, but at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. But as this time went on, and I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on, it's like everything spiraled out of control. And he had been working, he was a mechanic, and he worked at this place. He had been there for over 7 years. And he had a good job. He made good money. And he was a hard worker and dependable. And I thought he was going to work every day and bringing home a paycheck. And the money wasn't, you know, showing up. It would be real sporadic. One week I might get a paycheck, the next week we might not. And that was a huge issue, because it's like, how do you pay your bills? How do you take care of things when you don't have that other person's money to count on? Mm-hmm. And he would just, you know, say, well, I work for my money. I can do what I want for my money. And I'm like, well, but you have a family to take care of. You have responsibilities, you know? And he would argue and argue. I mean, every single day, it was nothing but arguing. It just was so toxic. It was horrible. It was horrible. That's the only thing I could say about it. And so he had a 401k that he had put into all those years that he had been there. And we had a joint savings account that we were saving for, you know, trip, or maybe if an appliance broke down or something like that. Well, come to find out, when I went to go get some money, because he wouldn't bring home his paychecks consistently, I needed extra money to pay for the bills and house payment and such, and there was no money in there. The account was completely empty.
Yeah.
There was no money in his 401k. That was completely empty. And I found out that he no longer had a job. He had been fired. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? This is more than just you seeing somebody else or having an affair. And I just confronted him. I'm like, what is going on? What happened? Why'd you lose your job? Why is all our money gone? And come to find out, he had been at work, and one of the guys they had hired from a temp agency came in, and he was a big drug dealer from Florida, and he turned Joe on to crack cocaine. And because he had a very addictive personality, he was pretty much addicted to everything that he came in contact with. He started on it, and he couldn't stop. First time he tried it, he was hooked. And that's where all the money was going. And when he was going to this person's house that I followed him to, this was an old schoolmate that he had was fascinated with, or whatever you want to call it. And they had connected because they were both big drug users. And he was basically going over there to get drugs because she sold, and he was getting drugs from her. He was getting drugs from the person that he worked with, who was the drug dealer. And it was just, I don't know where else. And I'm like, that became a point in time where I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't.
And did you make plans to leave, or did you go back to him after you wanted to leave the first time, or?
Well, I made plans to leave, but I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it. Obviously, I had no money, no resources, no nothing. And he was getting more and more violent, and just like you couldn't reason with him at all on anything. He was completely in a different world, in a different mind, in a different everything. And so I was thinking, if I started trying to save some money, maybe I could put some money away, and then maybe I could find a place to go. Or, you don't know. And you can't really talk to anybody because whoever it is that you're going to talk to, is going to tell you, well, I told you not to get involved in this. I told you not to get married to him. I told you he was bad news. I told you this wasn't going to work.
And so did your parents at the time, were they aware of your situation, or did you kind of keep that under wraps because you didn't want them to freak out, or?
Well, I tried to keep it under wraps for as long as I could, leading like this double life and this big facade and putting on, a happy face and everything's all great. But inside, everything was falling apart and crumbling, and I was absolutely miserable. And then I didn't want people to know what was going on because I was embarrassed, obviously. And I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this mess? So that's what I was focusing on. At the same time, I was still trying to protect myself. And then, there were times we had a very old house with a block basement. And I remember specifically a time that he got very angry with me, and he just said, it would be so easy for me to push you down this flight of stairs and leave you there, and it would look like an accident, and nobody would ever know that I ever did anything to you. He said, because I just can't take you yelling at me anymore, and I can't take all the constant questions and hassles, and it's just, and I'm like, okay. So I thought, would he really do that to me? And that was like the first time that I actually really realized that I think he actually could be capable of doing something like that, because he was so scary you couldn't look in his eyes. I mean, it's like he was just like possessed by the devil. It was just frightening. And then he also started at that point in time being abusive to our daughter. And, you know, she was only 4 years old at this particular time, and I'd be up there giving her a bath or upstairs, and he would come in there, and for whatever reason, it could have been anything, simple, whatever, and he decided that he didn't like something and he was going to do something about it. And I don't remember the specific incidents, if she was crying or what, but he proceeded to take her and hold her head underwater in the bathtub, and he just kept holding her head down. And I went over there and I started beating on him to get him off of there, because obviously if he continued to do it, she was going to drown. And it's just like he had no remorse, no care about anything. And he was trying to fight back to get me off of him, and I was trying to save our daughter. And then I did, and it was fine. And then, you know, he just would typically go and leave, and then that would be it. But he wouldn't. It used to be where he used to apologize for things and promise everything would be better, but it was a point now he wasn't even doing that, because he was like completely in a different world. And he wasn't taking any responsibility for anything. And I just knew that I had to find some way to get out of there. And then he was driving again one day, and he wasn't supposed to be, and he had come home. He was parked in front of the house, and I was waiting for him to get out of the vehicle and come in the house, and he didn't. And I kept looking out there to see what was going on. Well, I saw that he was bent over the steering wheel, and I thought, oh my God, you know, he's sick, I don't know what's going on. So I went out there and I tried to wake him up, and he wasn't responding. And so then I called the paramedics, because I thought, oh my God, did he take an overdose? Or I didn't know. And so I called the paramedics, and of course with the paramedics, I wasn't thinking that the cops would come. And of course they came along. They went in the car, and they discovered, you know, that he was just intoxicated and he had passed out. And because the keys were in the ignition, although he was not driving the vehicle at the time, they arrested him for driving after revocation, and they took him to jail. And when he would always call me from jail every time he got there, and he'd be like all nice and, you know, sweet talking, and, you know, I'm sorry for everything that I did, and please take me back, and post bail, and get me an attorney, and, you know, do all this stuff. And I always went ahead and did it, time after time after time. I'd get a bail bondsman. Somehow I'd raise the money. I'd either sell my wedding rings, or, you know, maybe I had coins around the house, something, anything to get money to get him. This particular time, I decided that I wasn't going to do that. I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything to pawn. I had nothing. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to leave him sit there. Even though I was afraid to death, because I knew what he would do when he got out of there. I knew he was going to be just livid and out of control and totally pissed off at me for doing that, to think that I would do that. And so, in the meantime, while he was in there, I decided that I was going to see if I could find an attorney that would do a pro bono service for a domestic violence case. And I was going to I was going to see if I could file for divorce. And with him out of my hands for the moment and incarcerated, it gave me a free moment to try and gather and get myself together.
Right.
So I got in touch with a woman who said that she would do this pro bono for me. And I told her what the situation was, and we drew up the divorce papers. And I said I don't want him to have any custody of his daughter. I do not trust him. I'm a fear for her life. I'm a fear for my own life. And, basically I don't care about the house. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to get out of this. And I want, my daughter and I to be safe. That was my main goal. That's all I was looking for. And so that's the way the divorce papers were created. And I actually served him with the divorce papers while he was incarcerated.
He did. What was his reaction when you did that? I'm sure he wasn't happy.
He was not happy at all.
Pissed off and...
He did not expect it. He did not see it coming. Nothing. But much to my dismay, he signed them.
Wow.
And it was recommended to me to get a restraining order against him so that because I knew how upset he was, and knowing his history, to protect myself and my daughter from him having any contact with us. So I also went and got a restraining order so that when he would get out of jail, I would be prepared for any retaliation that would come of it. And so I went ahead and I had some family and friends come over to the house, take out the necessary things that my daughter and I needed. And we went over to move in with my parents. And when he would get released from jail, he would come to the house, and it would be a shell of what there was before. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened. And I was prepared because I knew what would happen. And of course, the first place he comes to find me or look for me is at my parents' house. And he pulls up and he's mad and he's angry and he's out there screaming and hollering, and he knows that he's not allowed to be in their home. And of course, they're trying to talk him down and calm him, and he wasn't. And then they said, well, if you don't get off the property, we're going to call the cops. Well, he wasn't the least bit intimidated by that because big deal. He had just gotten out of jail and he had been in many times before, so
right.
It was no big deal to him. And so the cops were called, and he was told to get off the property, that there was a restraining order, that he was not to be within so many feet of me. And he went ahead and left. And that was that for that day. But then the next day, it was just the constant phone calls. And him showing up at work. And me being, embarrassed by my situation. And it just never ended. He was always hunting us down and going to daycare, trying to convince the daycare provider that, he had rights to take his daughter out. And then I would get phone calls from daycare saying, he's here trying to get his daughter, and we know that he's not allowed to do that. It was just, every day was something else. There was no peace of mind. There was no relaxing. There was nothing. It was just always looking behind my back, wondering, is today going to be the day that he's really going to try and do something? I didn't know if he would try to get a gun. I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know what he was capable of doing. And then one day I went back to the house, and he was in the house because that's, whatever, it was still his house. And I didn't know how he was going to pay for it because he had no money. He had no job. He had nothing. And I went there to get some more of my belongings and bring them back to my parents' house. And I saw that he was home, and I thought, this is going to be great. But anyway, I went in there, and I shouldn't have done that, but I did. And I was going to gather my belongings, and I went upstairs. And I found him on the bed. And I thought, okay, he must just be sleeping, taking a nap or something. Well, he wasn't moving. I tried to wake him up, And I shook him and I shook him and I shook him. And he was no response. And he was very funny colored, like a yellowish color. And I thought, I tried to see if he was still breathing, and he was. Well, I called the paramedics. And you probably think, why did I call the paramedics?
Yeah.
Why would I even do that? Why would I even care?
Right.
Because that's just the kind of person that I was, Because despite it all, he still was a person that I loved and cared about. He still was the father of my daughter. And I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do something, knowing if he needed medical attention.
Right.
So the paramedics came and they took him to the hospital. He had attempted to take an overdose. And when I found him, had I not called the paramedics, I had been told that, he would have passed away.
Mm.
So basically, he was admitted to the hospital. He was in the hospital for about 3 to 4 days. And after that, he decided that he was going to try to rectify things. When you're sober and you're in a different spot, your mind is thinking very differently.
Right.
And I think there was a part of remorse that kind of came over him at that point in time. Like, I've kind of hit rock bottom here. I've lost my home. I've lost my family. I've lost my job. I have no money. I have nothing. And I better do something to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided that he was going to check himself into an inpatient treatment facility. Was up north by Hazelden. And he checked himself into the treatment facility. And he was in there for a little over a month. And then he completed the program. And he got out. And of course, everything was going to be wonderful. And life was going to be great. And he was going to make it up to me. And
Right.
Promised me the world with a string around it. And I had this time had already moved out of my parents' home and had moved into like a low-income housing apartment.
Okay.
And I had been seeing someone else. And I don't know how, but he found out. And of course, even though we were divorced, that did not sit well with him.
Mm.
And he started, trying to come around. A little bit here, a little bit there, more and more. Doing his sweet talk, telling me everything that he knew I wanted to hear. Even though it was all a lie, I believed it all.
Right.
Because he was so convincing. And so then I started, feeling bad because he couldn't see his daughter. And, all this other emotions and everything. He was just playing me, but I guess I wasn't smart enough, or I didn't want to believe that someone could lie like that. I wanted to believe that people could make a mistake and they could come back from it and they could
Right.
change their lives.
Sure. So let's take a look at a video, a short video here, and then we'll be right back to talk some more with Lori. Here's a video.
3 is the number of women that are murdered every day in America by an intimate partner. 3 a day. 5 times more women are victims of domestic violence, either serious assault or murder, than are men. 85% of the victims of murder are women. And 100 women per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, are beat on by an intimate partner in the United States. Since we began this show, 100 women have been beaten by an intimate partner. Spouse, live-in boyfriend, whatever.
Okay, we're back talking to Lori about her situation that involved domestic violence. She's told us a lot about her life with a guy named Joe. And what else would you like to talk about concerning that relationship? And your, how do I say this? I guess your point is you want to let other people know that you're a survivor. It can be the worst fucking situation in your life, but you are a survivor. And there are people watching this right now, men and women, who are also survivors. And I think your story is very, very inspirational to other women who may be facing the same situation now and are not aware of, or they don't know how to get out of their situation because they feel stuck. Is that something that you had felt?
I felt really stuck, and I felt like even though I had these restraining orders, they were basically no good. They were a piece of paper that basically said, legally, you're not allowed to be near her or your daughter.
Right.
But that was all they were. Because he thought he was above the law, and the law didn't fear, he wasn't feared from the law.
Right.
Because he had been incarcerated so many times that it didn't bother him. And, you know, his goal was to put the fear of God into me. And he did. But it was also to manipulate me, manipulate his daughter, and get everybody to think that he was the poor old soul that didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
And, you know, convince me that he would make everything right. And like I said, he knew exactly what to say to get me to feel a certain way and believe him. And so I felt, I was so conflicted because part of me wanted to be back together with him and try it. And part of me knew that that was not the thing to do. Now, you would think, being through everything I had been, that it would be enough to just walk away from it all. But every time I walked away, he kept coming back. And he was like a stalker, you know, no matter where I was. He always seemed to find me. And, you know, he told me several times, he said, you know, you can go here, you can go there, you can go wherever. He said, but the point is, he said, no matter where you go, he said, if you don't want to be with me, he says, you won't be with anybody else. I'll see to that. And I was like, I believed him. I really believed him. And I thought, what can I do? I'm not getting any help. I went down to get financial assistance, assistance with housing, assistance with daycare, assistance with food stamps.
Right.
And they told me straight out, they said, you do not qualify for any assistance because you have a job. If you did not have a job and you were not bringing any income in, you would in fact qualify for assistance from the county. So in essence, what they're telling women is that you're in a bad situation. If you quit working, we can give you assistance. If you want to continue to work and have some self-respect for yourself, which is what I wanted to do, and be productive in the world, then we cannot provide any assistance for you.
That's such bullshit. I mean...
And at that point in time, I thought, where does a person in my situation go? Where do women and children that are in my situation go for help? I guess they go down there. I guess they quit their jobs. And I guess they just take the chance that the county is going to help them. until they can
Right.
get on their feet. You know, I don't know what the answer is or the situation is.
Right.
I don't know how you just keep running and you keep looking behind your back and you keep fearing where this person is. Are they going to call you? Are they going to show up here?
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to show up at your work? Are they going to show up anywhere you are? I don't know how they do it, but they do find you. And I just felt like, where am I supposed to run? The only place I had that I could go to was my parents. And I already tried that. And the reason that I wanted to leave their house, you probably wonder, is because he was bringing on such turmoil and despair to my family that I was so embarrassed and humiliated that I thought, I can't allow this to continue. I need to get out of this house and get into another place on my own.
Right.
Because it's not fair for them to have to be involved in this either. And despite them telling me, no, you're fine, you can stay here as long as you need, I'm just too independent and too determined in my head to do things
Right.
the way that someone else wanted me to do them.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, I got myself in this mess, I'm going to get myself out of this mess. And so like I said, I moved, and things were, trying to make a new life for my daughter and myself. And then I took him back after all is said and done. And he was really good for a while, like I had seen before. And I really thought that treatment had changed him, that time had changed him, that he felt bad for the things he had done to us. And he had an opportunity to rectify the situation. And he was going to make it right. And despite everything that my family said and the fact that they didn't want anything to do with me at that point because I had chosen to go back with him, even though I knew I was going to lose my family, I still went ahead and went with him. This is how much of a hold that this person had over my life, my thoughts, my feelings, my everything, that I wouldn't even listen to my own family. I went against what they were telling me to be with this man who had done me wrong and had been so mean to me and so mean to my daughter and so disrespectful and just made our lives basically a living hell. And yet, I still couldn't see my way through to not go back to him.
Wow.
Because I thought if I was with him, I could change him.
Right.
And, that's where I made a huge mistake. And through this whole process, I learned so many things. And one of them is that you can't ever change anybody.
You can't.
And I thought that I could.
You can try, but it doesn't work.
You can't. And if you ever think that you can, you're just kidding yourself. The reality is that you just can't do it, because people will change because they want to change, not because of anything you say or do. There may be things that you say or do that might resonate with someone, that might make them think, but ultimately they're the ones that have to do it. They're the ones that have to change.
Right.
They're the ones that have to decide to change, not for anybody else, but for themselves. And I wasted so much of my life trying to change this man and trying to believe what he was telling me, and that he could change and he could be different, and believing in somebody, because I didn't think that people could look right at you, right in your face, in your eyes, and just continually lie to you and be so convincing, just so convincing that you believe everything that they say.
Right.
And you want to believe everything they say. And they know that. And they know that you're weak. And they know what you want to hear. And they know how you want things to work out. So they'll give you anything that they can to keep you in it.
Oh, sure.
And why would someone want to spend their life treating others like that? I don't know.
I have never understood that.
There's got to be some type of a fulfillment that they get out of that.
Right.
I think that, you've just convinced yourself that no matter what I do, I'm always right. And the end result is I'm going to get what I want. And I'm not going to stop until I do.
Right.
And I think that's what they spend their time and energy focusing on, is it's a quest. I can get this person. I can manipulate them in such a way that no matter what I say or do, they're still going to be under my control.
Right.
And it's all about that control and,
Yeah.
knowing that you can just change somebody into what you want them to be
Right.
by sheer fear.
Mm.
It's just...
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Let's go to another video right now. We'll be right back.
My boyfriend Matt wants to break my family up because he thought I was lying to him. He thinks that I'm not a good mom. He said I belonged on the streets, and I was gonna be homeless, and that he was gonna take my son from me.
Oh my God.
20-year-old Eileen says that her relationship with Matt is being destroyed by his controlling and jealous ways. They have a 1-year-old son together and another one on the way. But she's terrified to leave him for good because he threatens to take their son and leave her homeless. Robin, I want to ask you to weigh in on this really quick. Matt, she's my wife. She's also one of the leading domestic violence advocates in America. She has a foundation, When Georgia Smiled, and which is devoted to the prevention of domestic violence. And she has something called the Aspire Initiative, which is an interactive curriculum to help tweens, teens, and adults learn about and deal with domestic violence. And it's used in schools all over the country. It's been recognized on the floor of Congress, United Nations. This is used everywhere. And one of your points is it's not just physical violence, right?
That's right. A lot of people think that domestic violence is if someone hits, kicks, punches you. And what we're seeing here today is verbal and mental abuse. And it really, like you saw before the show, when you even had to whisper in my ear some of the horrible things, Eileen, that he is saying to you, that's verbal abuse. You are in an abusive relationship. And, I've been sitting here during the show, and my instinct as a woman is to just run up there and grab you and just take you out of here as fast as I can, just run out the back door and just hide you and keep you from him. Of course, I can't do that. I want to. But what we're here to do today is to educate you and to tell you that you are being abused. You do not have to be talked to this way and treated this way. You can demand that he treat you with dignity and respect. You can demand that he treat you in an honorable way. And you can demand of yourself that you will not accept that of him. You have the right to tell him, you will treat me with respect. You will honor me. And you can make that demand of yourself. You can tell him, I am going to honor myself. I am going to treat myself with respect. I am going to treat myself with dignity. And I am going to give myself the right to walk away.
But what do you think about what she's saying?
It's ridiculous. I break up with her all the time, and I've never told her that I'm going to take the kid.
What was it that my wife just said that was ridiculous?
No. I thought she meant with her. No, your wife she's always spot on. I thought she meant with her. I'm still stuck on what came up on the screen.
Okay, listen.
I'm still stuck on the screen.
Let me tell you why I'm not going to enter your OCD loop here about what's stuck on the screen.
Okay.
I'm not going to go play this game with you and argue the ridiculousness of the wording on the screen. Yeah. Let me ask you something. Are you abusive with Eileen?
Yeah, verbally I say very hurtful things to her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you abusive with Eileen?
Yes.
Do you threaten her?
Can you elaborate on that? I mean, I don't. As in what, like?
Do I look like I want to play semantics with you?
No, you don't.
Do you try to manage her by intimidation?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I say threaten her. So you verbally abuse her, you derogate her, you erode her self-esteem, do you not? Now, you and I both know what's in these text messages that are too disgusting to read.
No, I know
And
what I say.
I'm happy to read them if
ridiculous.
you want me to read them for all these people. You want to talk about the wording on this screen? You want to go over some of the other wording?
No, I
don't think you do.
completely agree with you. I just don't want people to think that she's stuck in this relationship. Like I've broken up with her many times, and
You don't need to worry about what people think. You need to worry about what you think.
I don't trap her in this relationship. That's all I want to get across.
Okay, you got that across. You don't trap her in this relationship. Everybody got that? Everybody got that? He does not trap her in this relationship.
Okay, we're back, and if you are currently involved in a domestic violence situation and need some help, there is help. You can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. There you see the number on your screen, and I will show this again at the end of the video. But let's continue with our discussion with Lori concerning her situation. What did you want to say before the break? Did you hit?
No, I was just gonna finish the rest of my story and then kind of go from there.
Okay.
So anyway, I got back together with him, and we moved into a fancier, bigger apartment, and things were going okay, as you know had happened before. And he got back into going to AA and had a sponsor, and was not using drugs, and just everything was really seeming to turn around into a pretty good light. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe he really was serious this time, and maybe he really did want to make these changes and rectify what he did wrong. So then after we were staying in the apartments for a while, we decided that, you know what, we're going to buy a house. And so we went ahead and we looked for houses, and we bought a house together. And we were very busy fixing up the house and, just having a nice place of our own, kind of like a fresh start and everything. And was happy. Our daughter was happy. She was making new friends and going to, a new school, and had a big, huge yard that she could have her friends over and play with. And, things were really going pretty well. And I finally got to a point where I was able to reconcile with my parents and, say, I really told them, he changed, he's different, he's not the same person, really sold them what I thought was the truth and what had happened or was happening. And so they came back around, and they, would come down on the weekends, and we'd do family functions, and things are really starting to look different. And, of course, then again, little by little, things started changing, and, the arguments started happening daily, and then he started, I'm just going to have to go out with the friends after work and have one drink, and one drink led to two, and two led to four, and four led to six, and then the same old thing just was starting up again. It was just this pattern. And while he never did go back to the heavy drugs, the crack cocaine, he did go back to smoking weed. Although he said he never did, but he did. I mean, I found paraphernalia all over the house, and,
Wow.
Different things that took place and whatever. But, so just after we got back together, like I said, it was okay, and then it went bad again, and I wanted to get out for real this time, and he kept telling me, how are you going to afford this on your own? You knew what happened last time when you had the bright idea to run away and try to do things on your own, and financially you can't do it, and because basically I didn't have much of self-esteem when I got into this relationship. And by this point in time, I basically had no self-esteem.
And how long were you together with him up until the time you bought the house?
Well, I met him in 1988,
Mhm.
and we bought the house in 1998. So, 10 years.
Wow.
And then he, when I would say again that, we're done, I'm not doing this anymore, and he would continually remind me and bring up in my face that, you're ugly, you're fat, you're unattractive, you have no money. How are you ever going to take care of anything? And nobody else is going to want you.
Mm.
And he just drilled that into my head time and time and time and time again. And to the point where I believed him. I never looked at another guy. I never slept with another guy. He was the first love that I ever had. He was the only person I ever was intimate with. And I loved him, and there was nothing that I was not going to do to try and make this work out. I wasn't going to be the one where they said, oh, she quit on this. Even though I got divorced from him and I thought that things were going to be different, I allowed myself to be controlled by him and went back right into the same situation.
Mm.
And, there are just certain things that you can't change in life, and you can't reverse. And I beat myself up pretty much every day for doing what I did and making the choices that I made, and not doing a better job of, having a better situation for my daughter to grow up in.
Right.
My intentions were such that I wanted her to have a family. I wanted her to have her dad. I wanted to have a mom, a nice house, nice neighborhood. I wanted her to have all these things, and I thought in my mind, because I was being told by the other person that it was going to work and it would all work out the way I wanted to.
Right.
But in reality, it's like I was bargaining with the devil, basically.
Mm.
And it wasn't going to work out. It never was going to work out. He never was going to change. But I didn't see that. In my mind, I thought that things would work out and he would do what he said he was going to do, because I believed him, and that's not the case. But anyway, so life just kind of continued to go on like this. The cops were called over all the time because neighbors had heard arguing, and they had seen, several times where our daughter had been out in the yard and maybe riding her bike or doing different things. And when he wanted something, he wanted it now, and he was not gentle about it, so he would grab her right off of her bike in the middle of the street, throw her down on the ground. Neighbors would observe this. They would call the cops. It was just, there was no end to it again. And I was so beaten down at that point, so tired, so just had no fight in me, no self-esteem, no nothing, that I believed what he told me, and that I'm never going to get out of this. How am I going to financially ever be able to leave this situation?
Wow.
And no one would ever want me because I had nothing to offer anyone. And that's the way that I continued to lead my life, and in the same time try to put on this happy persona like everything was all grand. And it wasn't. There was nothing grand about my life. I hated it. I hated going home every single day after work. I dreaded it because I never knew what I was going to be walking into.
Right.
I feared every single day, every single move I made.
And you don't want to, I'm sure obviously you didn't want your daughter to be in a situation like that. I mean, that's obviously not healthy. I mean, that's abuse onto her as well, even though it may not physically be abuse. I mean, emotional, abuse, the verbal, the mental abuse, I mean, is sometimes and can be just as bad as physical abuse, you know.
No, you're absolutely right. And, you know, years later, of course, I come to realize all of that. And studies have actually shown that the verbal abuse far exceeds the physical abuse, because the physical abuse, yes, you may always have those scars to show,
Right.
but the mental abuse, that's a whole different level.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes years, and sometimes never does it ever turn out, you know, that you will change your mindset on things. I mean, you could be in counseling and therapy and whatever, and it's just that mental abuse really messes with you bad.
Yeah, no, as you know, can totally relate to that, because as a child, my whole childhood basically was physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, verbal abuse. I mean, it really fucked me up in every way, shape, and form. But as I've said before, if it wasn't for my grandmother, I would probably be in prison. I'd be dead. I'd be a child molester. I'd be a drug addict. I mean, you have to have somebody in your life that you trust that will help you out of a situation like that. And, you know, fortunately, I was able to get out of that situation as a child. So I can relate, and I know what it's like to be abused and shit on, basically. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. And it's very true. I mean, it's true for anybody that's been in those situations. And it's, like I said, that mental abuse, studies have shown that is far worse than the physical abuse.
Oh, yeah.
And I totally believe it. And when you've got, you know, like you said, a combination of all those different types of abuses going on, I mean, that's, you know, how do you recover from that?
Right.
What do you do? I mean, you feel like you're in a hopeless situation.
Right.
Just because it's just so much to deal with. And you don't know what to believe. You don't know who to believe. You don't know who to trust. And that's a huge part, you know. It really messes up the trust for you in any future relationships that you may have with anyone.
Right.
And, you know, that's hard to overcome.
It is.
No matter how strong you are, it's very difficult. And, you know, to put an end to this particular story, it did end up that he ended up killing himself. And, you know, it's a horrible thing to say, but if you've ever been in someone's shoes where they've been in a relationship where there was any type of abuse, especially multiple types of abuse going on, and you've tried to get away, it's almost a blessing that person is no longer there.
Right.
Because I'm here to tell you right now that if he was still here, my daughter and I would have had basically no life whatsoever.
Right.
Because it would always have been controlled by him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how we would have ever escaped from that. I don't know. I don't even like to think about it, but in essence, I mean, like I said, as awful as it is, I think he did us a favor.
Well, of course.
But,
you know, and you see stories all the time where a wife will actually kill her husband because he was abusing her for years and years and years, and she gets off and is justified because of all the trauma that she and her kids may have faced. I mean, and you're right, you know, if he was still here, he wouldn't leave you alone. And as bad as it is to say, that was the best outcome for him, for everybody, basically, especially your daughter, too.
yeah, you know, he was a very troubled person. And I believe he had several, you know, mental health issues. But he was of the mindset that there is no such thing, that, you know, you don't need treatment, you don't need therapy for those types of things. If you're depressed, or if you have other issues going on, mental health issues, you deal with them yourself. So even if he was, you know, whatever, he wouldn't have sought any therapy for it, because he just didn't believe in that type of thing.
Right.
But I do believe that he had something else going on there, other than the fact that, like I said, he had multiple addictions.
Right.
And, you know, I don't even know what kind of demons he was fighting, but he had a lot going on that I'll probably never understand or know. But it wasn't until after several years that I got out of, after he passed away, that I really started taking a look at myself and where I was, and just how bad things were in that relationship. I never really realized it all. And it's actually embarrassing, and it's humiliating to think that a person could be in a situation like that, where it appears to be right in front of everyone else's face, and they're trying to tell you and they're trying to help you, yet you can't see it.
Right.
You can't see what they're telling you, or you don't want to see what they're telling you, or you feel that you know the person better, and you know, they mean what they say and they wouldn't hurt you, and it's just, it's mind-blowing. I mean, my daughter and I both went through years of therapy, and in fact, I still continue to go to therapy. And, you know, I've processed things to a point, but I have been through therapy, you know, counseling and therapy, and I suppressed all my feelings for all these years and never really dealt with it, because it's so painful and it's so shaming. And I need to go through the process of dealing with this. And it's going to be a difficult process, but it has to be done. And that's something that, you know, I have to focus on doing, as hard as it is. I've got to do that. And I'll tell you, you know, people ask me, well, why did you stay in a relationship like that? And I said, well, because I didn't know any better. Because I was young, I was naive. I, you know, was raised to not get a divorce. I was raised to try and make things work out.
Right.
I was raised in, you know, to believe the best in people. And, you know, I didn't know about this whole other world that was out there, and how really evil and mean and controlling people can be.
Right.
And even still today, I can't believe that. It's just unimaginable to me that people can actually be like that. But they are. And every day, in every minute, in every second, there's a female out there, there's a male out there, or there's a child that's getting abused by someone.
Right. Now, look into that camera and tell someone, because I know there are people watching this now who are involved in a domestic violent relationship. Just look in that camera and just tell them that there is hope, and tell them what's on your mind as far as helping them.
I mean, I do want anybody that is listening to this to know that there is hope, and there is a way to escape this vicious circle and cycle that continues. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of willpower and a lot of determination, and you really have to you have to feel good about yourself, and that's a very difficult thing to do when you've been beaten down for so long, to have any kind of self-esteem, to know that you can get out of the situation. But if you feel like something isn't right in the situation that you're in, and you see these warning signs, and things start to happen that you know in your mind and your heart are not right, that's probably a very good indication that you want to get out of it, and do whatever you can to prepare yourself so that you're in a good position to get out of it. You know, seek out resources. There are shelters for women and children, and even men get abused by women as well. And you can seek out the resources for help. You can also contact your family. You can contact your friends. Don't keep it inside. Don't hide it to yourself because you're so ashamed and embarrassed. You know, it's not your fault. You are just trying to give love to somebody, and they're just evil. They just think differently, and they're just using you because they know that you're soft and you won't do anything. But you have to be stronger than that. You have to realize that you can and you will overcome this. And the sooner that you realize it after you see these warning signs, you know, don't kid yourself into thinking that it's all just going to go away and it's magically going to get fixed, because that doesn't happen. And you're just going to spend your life trying to fix something that is never going to get fixed. And the only thing you can do is you can fix yourself, and you can get out of it. And that's what you have to do. And you can't stop until you do it. And no matter what setbacks or what things hold you back, you've got to keep going forward and know that there is something better for you, and that you deserve better for yourself or for your children. And just don't look back, and seek out counseling help. There's mental health counselors out there. There's mental health hotline you can call. And there's all different types of resources that are available for people. So much more now than back, 20, 30 years ago when I was involved. And, just don't think it's hopeless, because it's not. I know there's times you're going to feel that way, but you have to be strong, and you just have to forge through it and know that you are a good person and you deserve to be happy and not mistreated by anybody. And you just won't stand for it because it's not right. In closing, I just wanted to say a couple things. If anybody out there is watching and knows somebody that is affected by domestic violence, and they pass this information along to them, or if it's you yourself that's listening to this podcast and is experiencing domestic violence, if I can change just one person's life out there and make it better, that would be amazing. And that, is all that I can actually hope for by telling my story, is that somebody sees it or tells someone else to see it that needs to, and they get the help that they need, and not to give up, because there is help out there. And if anyone has any questions about anything that I talked about today, I'm happy to answer them on another podcast show. If you just want to call the hotline and text or leave a message with any questions or anything concerning this episode, feel free to do that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I want to thank Michael for having me on the show today and giving me the opportunity to tell my story to others.
I just want to thank you for being on the show, sharing your story. I'm very proud of you for sharing it with the world. It takes a lot of courage to spill your guts out in front of millions of people. But I hope that somebody who is watching this gets help if they need it. And we will continue to do shows on this subject. If you're involved in a situation that you'd like to talk about, you could be a guest on the show. Once again, at the end of the video, I will put up the information on where you can contact the domestic violence hotline, as well as the show's contact information. I really encourage you to share this show and, of course, subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon. Also, if you're on Facebook, once again, go to the search box in Facebook, search that podcast show, and join the group. Would love to hear some comments. I encourage you to comment on this video. And we will see you again on the next show. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
That Podcast Show, starring Michael Dane.